Jeff, welcome back to the podcast.
David, thanks for having me again. I'm looking forward to this.
Likewise. I think it was like maybe a year ago or a year and a half, so it's been a little while.
Yeah, it has been.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think almost, yeah, at least a year. I'm not really sure how long ago it's been.
You were just getting ramped up in your business. I'm sure a lot of things have changed since we last did the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, we're just getting into our third year of business at this point, so things are going well.
That's amazing. What is you guys have grown pretty significantly from like a headcount standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah, we started with just a couple of us, and I think we're approaching the 35 person mark at this point. So yeah, we've had some significant growth here.
Nice. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, that is, and I'm glad, you came on the show because that's one of the trends we're seeing across the board at Evolve. We're seeing a lot more VDC and BIM consultant groups pop up in the market, and many of our customers that are VDC firms have grown like significantly over the past year. And so I was glad when I reached out to you, you were open to talk about this because I'd love to understand like what's going on in the world that's causing all this.
Yeah, I mean, I think more and more jobs are requiring it. I actually brought some facts along with because I wouldn't be able to memorize them, but I got three main ones I can go through real quick. So number one, the global BIM market was valued at approximately 8 billion in 2024, and they're expecting it to reach about 15 billion in 2029. So that's some
Oh my gosh.
significant growth coming downstream here. Adjacent to that, the US MEP service market um, is projected to grow from about 45 billion in 2024 to about 90 billion in 2029. So that's about doubling over the next 5 years here. That's
That's
insane.
crazy.
And I guess one last fact to support that, in 2021, it's stated that 74% of all architecture firms have adopted BIM. And as we know, the MEP and the construction side of things are lagging behind that. So if 74% of firms on the architecture side have adopted BIM, that means some even more stringent requirements are probably coming downstream in the next 5 years here.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Just more and more requirements. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because if the architecture, it's almost just solidifying Revit as the source of truth and
Right.
BIM being the source of truth in the space. That's wild. 75%.
Yeah, 75. Well, and that was back in 2021. So I would imagine we're 80 at this point, maybe. I'm not really
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
But
Wow. And I know like not just because the architect's using it doesn't mean they translate, but I know that a lot of owners, at least just from your experience, are you seeing a lot of owners wanting everything to stay in the model and being able to see it?
yeah, I think there's a lot of hype and buzz around this digital twin, and being able to utilize your BIM models for facility maintenance. And if they're requiring it, that means the entire project team needs to get on board with it. And I've heard from a lot of other firms similar to us that they're getting a lot of inquiries, as we are as well, about helping facility managers with utilizing BIM models. So it's exciting to see, I guess, the BIM process kind of going full circle there.
Yeah, that's wild. And just from growth in MEP, I mean, we've seen a lot of the tailwinds, but just from your experience and exposure, like what do you think is causing, what is it, doubling in size in 5 years? What do you think is causing that?
I don't even know the answer to that. Like, what's causing the boom,
Yeah.
the building boom?
Is it all AI data centers?
I mean, there's a lot of data centers out there, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of chip manufacturing facilities. I think industrials coming back to the United States a bit. There's a lot of manufacturing and distribution facilities. So just huge projects going on all across the nation right now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting. Not sure if it's going to slow down in the, next coming years. And so we may see, with
Mm.
doing more onshore rather than offshore. And
Yeah,
so,
I think so. I mean, according to this data, it's not going to slow down anytime soon,
yeah,
which is promising. It's exciting for us.
awesome. Well, yeah, absolutely. It's exciting for us too. And that's the thing. There's so much growth out there that there's a lot of industries where I think competition is is a lot is alive and well, but in this industry, for at least for our customers, I think there's so much opportunity. It's not a zero sum um, game. And so uh, there is more than enough for all of us to capture and be successful. Like we need, and I know we were talking, I think about talent recently and just how hard it is to find talent and hiring, like staffing uh, in order to meet different projects. We have a
Absolutely.
customer that their goal is to double in size in the next 2 to 3 years and then double again. But when you look at their staffing needs, they're like 60%, 70%.
Jeez.
And so it's it is definitely a big threat. And so that makes sense just why BIM consultancies, that alone, why they've popped up more and more. So
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a trend on outsourcing BIM. I mean, with the building with the market the way it is right now, um, and these job requirements becoming more stringent. These company need these. I can't talk. Let me start over. Sorry.
no, you're good.
Um, with outsourcing BIM, I mean, their requirements are becoming more stringent and more stringent. So your internal BIM teams might not quite cut it anymore. You might need to figure out other avenues. And I guess when you're deciding to outsource BIM, there's many different things to consider. There's lots of pros and cons. When you're choosing any sort of BIM outsourcing partner in general.
Yeah. So let's shift gears to that. Like, what would you say are like the pros and cons from your perspective to outsource BIM?
Um, let's start with the pros, I guess. Manpower number one. If you don't have enough people, they have people that you don't have, so you can bring them in. The flexibility of it. So if you only need people for a project or a month or something like that, you have the ability to ramp up or ramp down with it. Um, and then the expertise. Maybe you don't know how to do something. Maybe you don't have a BIM manager, but you plan on hiring one, but you need to figure something out in the meantime. You can utilize a BIM outsourcing company that specializes in something, and you can bring them on
Yeah.
board to plug a hole or even help you develop processes or something like that.
So do you have like is it consultants at like is it just BIM manager levels or do you have different like BIM specialists or even just like those that can really orchestrate or like a BIM director like orchestrate the entire BIM department? Like what do you see or I guess what is like you can service all those?
Yeah, I mean, internally we have varying positions from BIM technicians to BIM specialists to project leaders who are more like a project manager or something like that. We
Yeah.
have BIM manager type people and then BIM directors who can see like the bigger picture of how to implement and um, fix things utilizing BIM, I guess.
Yeah. That's interesting. Can you like could you use a BIM consult like let's say you were a change agent in the organization, you saw opportunity just from and let's say the upper management was struggling to really go all in on BIM like do you think like bringing in a consultant to help map like ROI or like what are the benefits does it get to that level?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to keep promoting our services, but one of the services that we offer is actually called a BIM audit. So we'll
Interesting.
we'll come in and we have a checklist of, I don't know, 100 things that helps us evaluate where current BIM to com or a current BIM department's at. So it's structure, it's your Revit families, your Revit templates, your standard
Interesting.
operating procedures, all of that. And we kind of give you a grade almost and help you identify like what you should be working on to improve your process as a whole. And then maybe even provide um, some areas that BIM TM could step in and help you go next level or something like that.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. I totally didn't mean to tee you up there, but hey, that's a good thing, right? You gotta
Yeah,
no, but that's really interesting. Like you have kind of like the methodology chart of just or a more maturity chart of like
yeah,
where does your organization fit and really
exactly.
goals.
The funny thing about that BIM audit is BIM managers hate it. They hate us coming
Really?
in and poking and trying to figure out what they're doing wrong. But
Yeah.
by the end of it, they actually look at us as we're friends. Like we're there to help them succeed in the long term. And maybe
Yeah.
they don't even know small things that'll help set them up for long-term success. Like we're not there to take their job. We're just there to help them get better.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the fear. Like you hit
Yeah,
the nail on the head of just I think a lot of people are when they see a consultant, they're afraid that hey, they might be coming after my job or exposing me doing a bad job. But like the fact is, and I don't know if this has been your experience. My experience has been, these companies are understaffed, especially when it comes to the demand that's out there. And so
right.
it's more about like being successful together. And if bringing in a consultant can help you skill up as a manager, like you're going to get the credit. It doesn't matter that the consultant, like at the end of the day, if you're the manager or the director, like you're going to get the credit for this BIM leader coming in or BIM specialist or BIM manager, helping you change the organization in a positive light. So,
Absolutely. And I mean, your consultant, it's just I don't want to call it a Band-Aid, but your internal BIM manager is the boots on the ground who's really going to make and implement those changes. The consultant's just there kind of to support it.
yeah. Yeah, support the success.
Yeah,
That's good.
absolutely.
What other pros?
Um, I
Or
guess kind of
the cons? No, I'm just kidding.
going along with the expertise piece, maybe you don't have somebody in-house who can create Revit families. Maybe you don't know how to modify your ITM database. Those are things that you can outsource and get a lot of success from and a huge ROI from if you have no idea how to do it internally.
Hmm. Yeah, that's it. I mean, how much time do you think it takes to like learn all of that? Because that
Well,
or to try
a
to do
long
it.
time. It depends on the person, but I mean, I've been doing it for the last 15 years, and there's things that I can look at and know what's wrong with it instantly. But 5, 10 years ago, it would have taken me half a day or a day or a week to troubleshoot an issue or something like that. So
Well,
it could even just be trying to get things expedited and out the door quicker with your BIM templates and your content and that kind of thing.
well, yeah, and so it probably like reduces the risk of doing it wrong and having to redo it.
Right. The other thing with that too is like if you're a smaller mom and pop type company, like you mentioned before, there's all these different levels of BIM professionals, and they all have different strengths and weaknesses. And your mom and pop type company usually has one or two BIM people who are supposed to do everything, and there's no way they can do everything um, in the
Yeah.
same high or the same quality that we would be able to provide or another BIM consultant. So
Would you like for that individual, would you like so like in your experience providing like part-time consulting. So it's because, mom and pop might not be, I mean, maybe they'll be able to afford like full-time BIM manager, but I could see some of them not be able to afford it full-time, and that's why they don't have.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, yeah. And I think that goes back to the flexibility of it. Maybe they only need somebody for a short amount of time or for a certain project or something, and then they can kick us to the curb after that.
Yeah. Let's. That's really interesting. Well, lots of pros. What if there's other pros? We can keep going into it. It sounds like there's a lot of pros to it.
There are absolutely, there's a lot of cons as well, though.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of cons, and there's a lot of things to really watch out for. And I think number one is just process. I mean, BIM as a whole is a process, and you bring somebody foreign into your process, there's a huge ramp up time depending on how that team is implemented.
Hmm.
And sometimes, shouldn't say sometimes, usually when companies bring in an outsourced BIM service, it's out of desperation.
Hmm.
Like, hey, we're halfway through this job, we're slammed, we got a deadline coming in, get in here and help us. That is the wrong time to try and
Hmm.
bring a BIM consultant on,
Yeah.
because they probably don't know your way of doing things, and most likely they're going to cause, or they're most likely they're going to cause more problems than good.
Hmm.
So they might get in there and tweak your family, not necessarily knowing what domino they just pushed over. So
Gosh.
there's a huge concern with data quality or just quality of your model in general.
Yeah. That's really interesting because people are probably not even thinking about bringing in a firm until they need it and they're
Right.
in a dire situation. Wow. And so if they bring them in and they're trying to get them to move fast, there's a risk of not doing the project correctly or just causing more disruption, more harm than good.
Absolutely. And then there's your BIM service providers that do it all. They do your engineering, they do um, architecture, they do MEP, they work for general contractors, and they can't do all of it well,
Yeah.
which means they're probably half-assing all of it.
Mm.
They're just taking whatever work they can get. And I've experienced it in the past where, let's say you're an electrical contractor or something like that, and you bring in maybe your cheapest BIM option out there. They might not understand constructability at all. So they're just putting stuff in the model, and you're constantly having to teach them, well, no, don't do it way, or don't do it that way. No, the box can't go there. Hey, you exceeded 360 degrees of bends. And by the time you go through all that effort, you might as well just have done it yourself.
Yeah. Man, that's really frustrating when I've found myself at that situation where it's like you'll sometimes bring somebody in and then it's like, man, like I could have done this myself, but obviously like you've got to take bets and you've got to build for the future. And part of it is finding those partners to your point before you need them, right? And
Absolutely.
really getting to see if it's a good partnership. That's so like what are some tips? Like let's jump into like like what are some good tips to like choosing a good firm? Uh yeah. What do you think?
Um, it's not necessarily all about taking the low number. And I think a lot of times that happens. They might put a job out for bid, they get three or four bids in the door and the low number wins. Make sure you're treating it as an extension of your team. So if
Hmm.
you were gonna
Yeah.
hire somebody, you'd put them through an interview process, right?
Yeah.
Ask them tough questions, make sure they're a good cultural fit, make sure they understand what they're doing and they have processes in place, quality control, make sure they know what QC even means. I don't know, there's all kinds of things. Just make sure you're making an informed decision and not just pick the low number.
Yeah. Well, I like how you compared it, like treat it like it's somebody you're hiring on your own team. Would you just hire the cheapest person? Probably not. You don't want a C player or somebody that's usually a B player can perform like at three C players and then an A player can perform at like the level of three B players. And so it's you know and that's really interesting. And like you said, putting them through an interview process, um, that's really interesting. Is there ever a time where like should a company do kind of like a meet and greet with the BIM team to just see like or like even a trial of like seeing the synergy of how you meet with the team? Like have you ever seen that?
Like you're talking about in person or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've done that locally. We haven't really flown out a whole bunch to do it. We have with some existing clients, but not usually ahead of time just because of the risk with putting that much money out there kind of
Oh
thing.
yeah.
But if it's somebody locally, absolutely invite them to your office, get to know them kind of thing. See if it's somebody you would want to work with and go from there.
Yeah.
I think when you're deciding on the company though, you have to have a strategy in mind. There's different ways of outsourcing. So if it's augmentation because you have a huge job or something like that, there's a couple different strategies that you could go. Like if you're trying to insert a team into your process, it's going to be more challenging. There's going to be more ramp up time. There's going to be a lot more hand holding. Um, then there's the other approach where you can literally chuck a project over the fence and let them deal with it from start to finish, which can be successful as well, as long as you're still interfacing with them.
Mhm.
I think the most challenging approach though is when you're melding two teams together on the same project.
Hmm.
So I guess just
So, like
make
when a
sure,
project's already in motion and then
yeah,
you're bringing in, yeah. Why is that?
just as the company that's outsourcing BIM has internal processes. They've developed they've developed a template with families that they're used to using.
Yeah.
You bring in this other company who maybe has never touched that before. Maybe they have a completely different way that they go about doing BIM. So trying to get them to kind of conform to your way of doing things, to understand why you do them can be challenging. Like, don't do too much too quick. Like, make sure you have like a single point of contact so you're not having to teach their entire team. You're just kind of working with one person and they're able to relay that information. And if they don't have an infrastructure like that in place, it's probably not going to be successful.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, yeah. So what if there are companies out there that are finding themselves in a place that they are in a challenging situation where they have got a project and they're in that situation that you said is common, which we want to protect against. But I mean, how does that person know who to choose? Like what are some helpful tips if they had to bring on a BIM consulting firm to help them finish an existing project? Like what advice would you have for that individual besides they should have hired somebody, 6 months ago?
Temper your expectations and maybe ease into it. So there might be certain aspects that are easier to pass off than others. So if you're on a job that has crazy requirements about how things need to be modeled in there, um, maybe keep that internally. Just do all the modeling yourself, but maybe you can outsource some help with developing sheets and views and dimensioning and tagging and creating bill of materials because it's a lot easier to like mine the data that's already in the BIM model than it is to transfer that, I don't know, that knowledge that's
Yeah.
been gained over the last 6 months or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good. So, let's shift gears a little bit. I guess like, you know, when, we've talked a lot about like pros and cons and like choosing the right firm and a couple of scenarios, but how do I know? And ideally, it's not when we have the problem, but just if I was a mechanical contractor, for example, and I'm looking at my team and my team has, let's say we're 80% staffed and we've got aggressive growth goals. Like, how do I know when to start looking for a VDC firm or where to even start? Like, I guess, yeah, like when should we outsource? Like, what are some of the signals of you really need to prioritize this?
When your entire team walks out and says, F this, I'm done. Yeah, no, long before that.
Yeah.
I mean, if your company is doing it right, you should have some sort of backlog that's providing you with information on roughly how many hours you have over the next 6 months. And if that greatly exceeds the amount of people that you have internally, then you should start looking at other opportunities um, to outsource, I guess, or hire, one of the two.
Yeah. But like, and I think that's good. You're right. I think if you don't have a successful operation, that is very difficult, and team can be frustrated, um,
Yeah,
and burnt out. I've seen that a lot of times, and so it can help augment, that and protect, the team in that sense.
yeah.
Uh,
Those surprise projects do come up though. I've seen it time and time again. Your electrical contractor, your preferred vendor or something like that. And they're like, we want you on this job that starts next week. Like, oh crap, we don't have anybody in the BIM department.
oh yeah,
How do we get somebody on board now?
interesting. And so, do you think it's just like, every like just having like it doesn't hurt to have a good BIM department in your back pocket.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even if it's just having steady conversations here and there about um it could be strategy. It could be having a company that knows your way of doing things so that
Yeah.
that you have somebody to turn to and you're not making a bad decision.
Yeah. I mean, what do you do with, like, let's say you were talking about outsourcing. What if you've got like a manager that's like, I don't want to outsource because I like the team that I have and I don't want to have to replace them.
Um, you always need some sort of backup plan. What happens when somebody on your team quits? I mean, it's a competitive market right now. People are getting poached all the time. So I think if you're a good BIM manager or a good BIM director, you should be always planning for the worst. So you should have somebody in your back pocket.
Yeah. That's good. We see a similar thing with a lot of our customers. I've seen some of the specialists nervous, but that when somebody comes in, but at the same time, it's you know there's more than enough opportunity to go around, and I don't think I haven't really seen it transpire in. All right, we're gonna just shut down the BIM department and just outsource everything. It's always been we're gonna augment, and they're gonna actually help us hit our agenda, so you can actually go home on time. Like,
Sure.
you
And
can.
if the company did do that, that means they probably weren't bought into the BIM process
Anyway,
as a whole, and they're probably just doing it out of necessity,
yeah.
like to meet a contractual obligation or something like that. So run for the hills anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Um, what let's I guess, like, yeah, as we're wrapping this up, like, what would you say is like the number one piece of advice you would give to someone who's, somebody, a BIM manager, BIM director that is looking to, possibly outsource, or looking at their resources and outsourcing more or outsourcing less? Like, I guess, how do you, like, what piece of advice would you give them?
Um, I would say maybe change your thinking a little bit and think of outsourcing as a strategic move more than just a necessity or a necessary evil, I guess.
Hmm.
There's many benefits that can be gained from it, so don't look at it as I only do it if I have to.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, like, it's not just the reactive. It's not
Right.
just, all right, I have a project, I'm going to use them, but it's looking strategically as like, hey, maybe they're like the Marine special ops. As you if you
Yeah,
as you launch new initiatives within the organization, they can help spin that up. You hire people,
exactly.
to maintain it, and then they move on to the next opportunity.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're considering implementing new technology, maybe they can give you some perspective on it. If you're looking at developing new content, you don't have somebody in-house, maybe they can build it for you. There's all kinds of things. I mean, your BIM consultants work with clients all across the nation, and different markets, they probably have seen something that you have never seen before.
That's really good. I really like that. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's always a pleasure having you here.
Thank you, David. I appreciate it. Had a lot of fun.
Likewise.